All right. All right. Here we are. All right, guys. Welcome to our final session of See You at the Closing Table, Contract to Closing Table Mastery for Florida Realtors. This is a super exciting day. We have finished a very detailed discussion of this topic. For those who I have not had an opportunity to meet before, my name is Ray Cole Jackson. I'm a South Florida real estate and finance attorney. A little bit about me personally. I am originally from Florida, Miami specifically, so 305. I attended the University of Florida for undergrad, so I always say go Gators, just because I love to agitate any Seminoles in the room. I attended the Santa Clara University School of Law in California, where I was the founder of the Real Estate Law Society there in California during law school. Came back home to Miami and got my LLM in real property development from the University of Miami School of Law. So go Canes secondarily. And I am, like you, a licensed realtor in Florida, also in Georgia, and a licensed loan officer in Florida as well as Georgia. So we are just all things real estate over here. So, as I indicated, today is session 12. This is our last day of this journey through the contract to closing process for Florida realtors. We've discussed a lot of good topics. We've pretty much made it into bite-sized pieces, hopefully, so that you just come behind the curtain and really just understand the things that's going on as it relates to the contract to closing process, as it relates to closing, right? So just as an overview, first session, Title 101, Title and Escrow Demystified. We went over what is title. Like we say title, but do we really understand what title entails? And we really went over the responsibility of the title agent. We talked about the idea that we are title and escrow, right? So the closing agent is issuing a title insurance policy at closing, and they're also managing the money, which is escrow. Our second session, we went from contract to closing file open. We went over what is the information that is collected, why is it collected, and why that impacts the springboard to a smooth closing, right? Good data in, good data out. Bad data in, bad data out. And so we went over what it looks like to open a file. And then session 3, we started going over the various searches that title orders, right? And that we review for to prepare for closing. And so in session 3, we went over the title commitment. We told you specifically how this is essentially the holy grail as it relates to the title section or portion of our responsibility, because this tells the title agent specifically, hey, closing attorney, this is what you must resolve in order to issue that title insurance policy at closing, right? Then the next session we went over is the lien search. That's another search that the closing agent orders. We went over what information the lien search provides, what is imperative to closing, meaning it must be resolved in order to close, and what is essentially optional based upon the terms of the contract. So we talked about, for example, open permits. We talked about unrecorded code violations. Those items, unless you add the additional terms language in the contract, it's informational. The buyer will know, the buyer and seller will know that those items came up on the lien search, but those items do not prevent closing. It is only what is reflected on the title commitment that will impact closing, and the title agent has a responsibility to address. Then we went over the survey. You guys got an understanding of what the survey is used for, right? How issues can arise with the survey. Also, we tied in where in your purchase and sale contract, it talks about the survey, right? And deadlines that you have to address any results of the survey that your buyer is not happy with, right? So they have an opportunity to say, I don't like this easement, right? I'm buying two lots. There's an easement right between the two lots. This will not work for my intended use. You have that right, but you have a deadline to make sure that the seller is notified of that. Then we went over estoppels. And we went over what the estoppel tells us at closing. How does the closing agent use that? What is the information that's provided? We talked about violations, HOA violations. We talked about the financials that are identified in estoppels and how those figures are added to the settlement statement. And then we talked about the closing costs as a whole, right? We talked about paragraph 9. We went over the closing costs that are indicated in the on the purchase and sale contract at paragraph 9. And we talked about how we determine who's responsible for paying those costs. In session 8, we talked about what those costs look like on the Alta settlement statement versus the closing disclosure. We went over those two different statements, why they look different, right? And how you can understand the differences. And then, more importantly, to make sure that you know how to properly review a settlement statement, because ultimately you are the real estate professional, right? And of course, we want to know for sure how to calculate and to identify that our commission is correct. But there's a couple other closing costs on there as well that you should know how to identify. Session 9, we went over the seller net sheet, and you guys were introduced to the closing cost calculator, and you went over how to calculate, how to prepare seller net sheets, how to use those in your listing presentations, how to use them when you receive an offer, how to compare multiple offers using the closing cost calculator. Session 10, we went over attorney seller representation at closing. What does that look like? In those counties where the buyer has selected the closing agent and the seller can select an attorney to represent them at closing, what does that look like, right? What are the services that the attorney is going to provide to the seller? What is the closing agent's responsibility now that there are two different parties involved in facilitating this closing process? That was discussed in session 10. Last week we discussed divorce, FERPTA, death, and other special issues at closing. That was a very important topic because, as we discussed, I told the team during office hours the next day, we had about 3 files that kind of died because these issues arose. And, unfortunate for the realtors, one of the things that came out of the session, guys, is that these are topics, these are issues that can either be avoided or can be managed if they are addressed early, meaning at listing. At the listing appointment, these items should be identified and they should be managed to not prevent you from closing. So, all of these sessions are recorded. They're on our YouTube channel. I think with the exception, I think this is the one that unfortunately someone's note taker hijacked the recording, so we don't have a recording for session 3. How do we not have a recording for title commitment on the title training? But here we are. So with that being said, all of these sessions are on our YouTube channel, and so for your re-review pleasure, okay? And here we are today, session 12. Our final session is the modern closing experience. It is the Florida Realtors Guide to Mobile and Remote Notary Solutions. So remote online notaries, right? So as we always do, go ahead and grab the handout before we get into today's discussion. Labhandout.com, labhandout.com. And the link is also in the chat. All right. All right. So for today's discussion, the modern closing experience, your guide to mobile and remote online notary solutions. So the goal of today's discussion is to make sure that we understand the difference between these two options, right? Because I 100% am aware that there is some misunderstanding about these two options, how they work, when they can be utilized. And so that is the second objective today, is knowing precisely when these two options can be utilized. Now, I will say that mobile notaries and certainly remote online notaries are a welcomed modern solution to the closing experience. Um, Guys, really gone are the days where everyone, well, certainly you guys will be surprised how many sellers, buyers show up to close and they're like, if it's a seller, like, where are the buyers? If it's the buyers, where are the sellers? Like, they still think that that those two sides come to the table together at the same time. And obviously we're so far away from that. But not only are we far away from the two parties coming to the table at the same time, we're also moving away from the parties coming to the table at all, especially on the seller side. The buyer side, it's about 50-50. But we now have very convenient ways and alternatives to the buyers or to the parties uh, completing their signing responsibilities for closing. Now, why is this important for us? Geographic hurdles. You have buyers, you have sellers that are not local, right? That's super common. We have buyers and sellers all the time that are in different states, sometimes even in different countries. And so to be able to have these alternatives to a individual physically appearing is very ideal. Time constraints. Folks are busy. Folks are busy. And they want to be able to, kind of just get this done quick and in a hurry without, of course, being careful and not missing anything. But what's the most efficient way for us to be able to facilitate signing is what they're looking for. And then there are some circumstances, unfortunately, where we do have some sellers and buyers who are experiencing immobility for various reasons. They may be in the hospital. They may be at facilities such as nursing facilities, but they just simply do not have the ability to make their way into the office. And so mobile notaries and online notaries are a very good alternative for them. So, and these things can often, before now, they would be a threat to a smooth closing day. Like, oh my God, you know, my buyers can't make it back in town, or they missed their flight, right? Or, one seller is here and the other seller is there. All these different issues or threats, common threats in past times would prevent a smooth signing. But again, now we have these two paths to the alternative closing table, and these are the two that we are going to discuss today. Of course, the mobile notary and the remote online notary. So we know that with the mobile notary, the big idea is that we're bringing the closing table to the client. We're bringing the closing table to the client. This is going to be a Florida notary who's going to travel directly to your client, right, for them to sign their documents. This is essentially old school paper and pencil, or not pencil, but pen, paper and pen signing. No technology. It's an in-person experience. They're physically there together. The convenience is wherever the signers need to be. Um, the notary will meet them there. And in most cases, 24 hours. Notaries now will meet these sellers or buyers 24 hours, meaning whatever time they're available, wherever they're available, the notary will make themselves available. This is, as I mentioned before, this is ideal for clients who are probably elderly clients. We have elderly clients that do well with this. And especially for clients who are not good with technology, which we're going to talk about the RON. If your client is not good with technology, we're not even going to try. We're not even going to open the conversation about Ron, because not necessarily that Ron is difficult, but if there is tech involved and if you're uncomfortable, it's just going to be a disaster. All right. Now, of course, there are some vulnerabilities to a mobile notary, which includes traffic delays, weather, and sometimes this doesn't happen all the time. But I literally had notaries like, I can't find parking. There's no parking outside this building, and so I'm running behind. I need to kind of circle the block, find a parking space, and so the notary was behind. But here we are. They made their way there. So again, it's not perfect, but it's an option, and these are, when we do take into consideration potential hurdles, those are they, which is the traveling. So what is the checklist needed that we communicate to customers when they are going to meet with a mobile notary? Of course, they need to ensure that they have valid government ID available, because a notary is going to scan their ID. They're going to include their ID with the documents when they are returned to the closing agent. They need to make sure that they have a physical location. And then, of course, all documents are going to be prepared and ready. And then they have to allow for sufficient travel time. With the mobile notary, especially if it's a lender's package, potentially being 100 pages, we typically want to schedule them the day before. to give them an opportunity to print those documents, make sure that everything prints properly. If they are a good notary, they're going to not only print those documents, they're going to go through and they're going to highlight where signatures are required. You don't want a notary who's flipping through the day of, it's the first time they're seeing their package, because those are times when you could potentially miss signatures. All right. Now, let's talk about RON, or remote online notary. Before we get into the specifics of this, the first thing I want to say, guys, is RON is not FaceTime. And someone's laughing like, we know better than that. Well, you'll be surprised. It's not FaceTime. It is a dedicated technology platform that is used specifically for online notarization, because it is recording both video and audio of the session. It is also requiring that the signors successfully answer what we call knowledge-based questions. What are those types of questions? If you guys have ever went on a secure portal and they say, well, which one of these cars have you never driven? And which of one of these cities have you never lived in? Which of these banks did you have a mortgage loan? Right? And these questions are generally pulled from your credit history. And so you must answer these questions correctly. The potential threat with this is, we've had times where the sellers could not answer these questions. It doesn't happen often, but it is something that must be taken into consideration. And so for that reason, similar even with the mobile notary, we want to make sure that we schedule these RON signings early enough in advance to, in the event that there's an issue, that we can try again. And you literally can try again. You will like go on a different platform. The mobile notary can take them from one platform to another to try those questions again. But that is what RON looks like. This is best for you know, out of state sellers, local sellers, busy sellers. Guys, I'm going to tell you the truth. Um, your sellers love this. When they find out they can sign via RON, they're like, really? Thank God. Like, I mean, I don't have to drive. You mean I can get this done at 7 p.m., 6 p.m., 5:30 on a Saturday or on a Friday? Like, yeah. And they really, really, really enjoy RON. Another benefit of RON is that once those documents are signed, they're back right away. With mobile notary, the documents are signed, they're taken to UPS or FedEx, and then they're mailed back. With RON, as soon as those documents are signed, they're like DocuSign. It's just like DocuSign, but it's using a platform that is authorized for remote online notarization. Okay? So here's what you need to know. If you feel like you want to, um, if you're hearing conversations from your seller or buyer that they need to use RON, here are the system requirements for RON. Of course, they must have a computer or tablet. Can they do it from a phone? Sure, but what's the limitation with the phone? You can't see the documents as clearly. So computer or tablet is preferable. Preferable. They must have a working camera, and their microphone must work. And of course, they must also have audio. They must have speakers, sound out, sound input and output to follow the notary's instructions. They must have a stable internet connection. If the session drops, you have to start over. So you cannot have a unstable or unreliable um, internet connection. And then they still must have their physical government ID. They're literally going to hold that identification up to the camera. There's going to be a screenshot of it, and it's going to be included with the documents that are required, that are submitted to us when the RON signing appointment is completed. All right. Like I mentioned before, the client must have the technical ability to navigate. They're literally going to get a link to sign in. Once they sign in, they'll appear on camera. The notary appears on camera, and they answer the questions to get to the signing documents. All right. Now, we have an understanding between mobile notary versus RON. Which of these options that are available is determined by who is your signer. Who is your signer? For sellers, 100% yes. Ron is available for them, assuming they can answer knowledge-based questions. If they can't answer knowledge-based questions because they don't have, for example, a credit history, or for whatever reason they can't remember the information in the course, they can't use Ron. But as a general matter, sellers, 100% yes, can always use Ron. It is an excellent, convenient, it is the most frictionless option for them. If you represent the buyers, if they're a cash buyer, same 100% yes, assuming they have the tech capability and they can answer the questions. Why cash buyers 100% yes? Because with finance buyers, most lenders are still not allowing buyers to sign all of their documents electronically. We had one closing last year that was 100% electronic. And that was an outlier. And we've not had any for buyers, for a finance buyer. And we've not had any ever since then. And I mean, I hope that we get more, but that's just not the case. It is very much an outlier for a lender to allow a buyer to sign all of their closing documents electronically. I'm going to say that again because I do not want anybody to get their buyers' hopes up. With the exception of one closing last year, we've not had any buyers, not one, that is able to sign all of their documents electronically. So do not tell your buyers that they can sign electronically. They cannot. You might as well assume no, right? Now, with what some lenders are doing, they will have what's called a hybrid closing, where the buyer will be able to sign a good portion of their documents electronically, and then the balance of the documents are still wet signed in front of a notary. So again, a hybrid closing is where the buyer is going to sign a good portion of their documents online, and they're going to be signed using the lender's platform. So if it's, for example, UWM, they're going to sign on UWM's platform. If it's Rocket, they're going to sign on Rocket's platform. If it's Rate, formerly known as Guaranteed Rate, they're going to sign those documents on the lender's platform. The lender's going to be continuously sending them emails reminding them, hey, you have documents that you need to e-sign before you wet sign your documents. They're also reminding us as the closing firm. They haven't signed half of their documents yet. They have not signed half of their documents yet. They need to sign this portion of their documents online. Now, I will tell you that when that type of closing is set up, there are two packages that are sent to us. We have the portion that the buyer has been given an opportunity to sign electronically, and then the portion that has to be wet signed. In the event, for whatever reason, the buyer doesn't get it done, the portion signed electronically, then that entire package is signed wet signature. And I know you guys, somebody just did a deep exhale, and you should, because now we're sitting here for 100 pages versus 25 pages. Literally, the package is like so thin when the buyer does a hybrid. All right. So, recap. Who can sign using Ron, remote online notary? Sellers, generally 100% yes, if they have the tech capability and can answer the knowledge-based questions. Cash buyers, generally 100% yes, if they have the tech capability and they can answer the knowledge-based questions. Finance buyers, generally no, unless they're doing a hybrid. And again, the electronic version of that signing is facilitated by the lender. The closing agent, we're still going to facilitate the wet signing portion. Now, why are sellers prime Ron candidates? Just because they expedite the process, right? Even if they're traveling, we have no issues with signing. So this becomes, remember guys, we've been talking about preparing for the process, preparing for the entire process as soon as possible, right? So again, many of you like to, in your listing appointments, it's probably going to come up. Oftentimes it comes to, oh, we'll be traveling, or this person has been deployed. Now that you guys know that you have these options, you can confidently say to them, well, since you'll be traveling, we'll make sure that the closing attorney is made aware that you would like to use an online notary, right? All you need is your laptop, government ID, and about 15 minutes in a quiet room to sign. It literally goes that quickly, right? So you can have that conversation in advance, right? Because this now we're continuing to get into how do we create this just convenient and a modern closing experience for your clients. Convenient and modern closing experience for your clients. Again, going back to what we talked about when we talked about seller representation and last week with special closing issues, a convenient and modern closing experience for your clients, particularly on the seller side, is for you to get ahead of issues or requirements that you know that are going to come up, right? So, for example, we talked about if you have a seller in a county where the seller can select the closing agent, send the file in, let title start working on that because we want to make it seamless. We want to make it convenient. With the lien search, maybe the lien search isn't ordered, but you go on the county's page and start looking at whether or not there are any expired permits, unrecorded code violations. We talked about valuation, having a relationship with appraisers that can give you a desktop underwriting. I'm sorry, appraisal, right? Or just a overview appraisal. So, and even with signing, we can foreshadow or give them foresight into the closing process. Last week we talked about unique special circumstances with probate, divorce, short sale. We don't have to wait until the issue arises till we get to that milestone that we know is coming before we start having that conversation. So likewise, with their signing appointment, will you be in town for signing? Do you foresee any unavailability for being in person for signing? If so, not a problem. As sellers, we can coordinate signing online. Now, here's one special circumstance. And Lucy, you asked this question. On the reason I didn't respond to you right away because I knew it was coming. International sellers. Generally, international sellers can sign via RON as well. However, there are requirements that we have to make sure that the seller can meet to use RON, right? They have to be able to connect to the US, right? And because we know that some networks do not allow RON to work internationally, right? So the point is, if you know that the seller is going to be international, let us know ahead of time so that we can determine whether or not RON is an opportunity for them. They may have to go old school and meet a notary at the embassy. We've done that before. They have to get the documents signed at the embassy and send those back. But in most cases, even an international seller can sign using RON. Here's what we ask of you. Just notify the team immediately. Notify the team immediately regarding any potential unavailability of both your buyers and your sellers, right? So that we can plan accordingly. All right. So we talked about the two different paths. Let's do a quick overview as to the difference between the two. Cost. They both cost about the same. About $200 for both RON and mobile notary. They both cost about the same. Speed, of course, RON is faster because RON doesn't require anyone drive anywhere. You just need to make yourself available online. Mobile notary, of course, the speed of access to the notary is limited by driving distance, time, so on and so forth, like just to get there. The convenience of the two, mobile notary, they both um, will take the closing table to the client, right? A mobile notary, they both take the closing table to the client. Um, all things being equal, with RON, I think that's just extreme convenience because you can be absolutely anywhere and sign from any device, and you could be, you don't even have to be professionally dressed, right? Oftentimes when people we meet with the notary, they want to make sure their house is just so wherever they are. But with Ron, it's very convenient. Security with a mobile notary, physical ID is required. Security with Ron, of course, is heightened. I just told you guys they have to be able to answer knowledge-based questions. They have to become on camera. They have to have audio because the appointment is recorded. And then availability, there may be limited availability for notaries. Like Florida, South Florida is highly populated, but there's some pockets in Florida that are country, right? And there are notaries everywhere. They can just drive around, drive out to someone's home. So, of course, that's where Ron comes in, right? As long as you have the technical capabilities, you can sign from anywhere. So, that's a high level overview of the two different paths. So, real world application. My seller just moved to Colorado, can't fly back for closing. Okay, that's fine. They can sign by Iran, right? That's not a problem. My buyer unexpectedly was admitted to the hospital this morning. This happens. It's unfortunate. Okay, that's fine. We'll send out a notary. So the point is, guys, we have options now. We want to curate a modern closing experience for your buyers. Some of your buyers, maybe they have enough time to do a walkthrough, but they don't have time to, still drive to the office. And so maybe the mobile notary meets them at their workplace. So let's just think we have modern options that are available to us now. Let's keep that in mind. And again, as we move forward to closing, just make sure that you notify the closing team that this is something that the buyer or seller would like to use as an option, um, alternative to coming into the office. So, just a quick cheat sheet. If the situation is the buyer or seller is they prefer paper, they're not tech savvy, that makes them anxious to think about going online, mobile notary. If they are traveling out of state, Ron. If the client is in the hospital, assisted living facility, they can't make their way into the office, and you definitely don't want to try and trouble them with the tech and knowledge-based question quiz, mobile notary. They're busy, they need it done quickly, Ron. Finance buyers, because of lender requirements, they're doing a mobile notary. Overseas clients, of course, assuming that legally they can meet the requirements, they're doing Ron. Reminder, just be sure to communicate any special circumstances to the agent as soon as possible. For example, what if you have non-English speaking signers? We had that last week, this week, last week. So we need to know that because we need to make sure that there is going to be a translator. You got to have a translator available for that person that does not speak English. And it cannot be one of the other signers. It has to be someone that does not have an interest in the sale, right? So special circumstances, let us know. So recap, if you guys want to do a quick screenshot of this to ensure that the client is fully prepared for their signing method, of course, we're going to notify them, but just for your information purposes, and maybe you might want to add this um, to your presentation, to your listing presentation, to your buyer consultation. I personally think this would be sharp to let them know that you're providing them with a full service, right? I'm not just thinking about just the transaction itself, but I'm thinking about your entire journey through this process. Your journey through this process is going to include a signing appointment where here are the options that are available to you, and what's going to be needed in order for you to sign at that time, right? That's very impressive. Okay. All right. All right. So with that being said, just to give you guys insight, just to know that the team, when we schedule your signings, the intention is for it to be a convenient and a seamless close, right? If we're hearing from your sellers that they work, I can tell you right now, just because sellers always respond favorably to Ron signings, we automatically tell them this is how you're going to sign. This will allow you to sign from any location at any time, right? Now, of course, if they're already having troubles completing intake sheets, they're not a candidate, right? So we're not even going to offer that to them. But most sellers, and they're fine with that. And of course, cash buyers. Because again, ultimately, we want to prioritize the most convenient and frictionless experience for your clients. And then lastly, um, our decision on what to offer to the clients as they're signing options, of course, has to play into what we can legally do, right? Again, we would love for the buyers to be able to e-sign their entire package, but simply can't. The lenders don't allow that, right? So this is the overview that is in your handout. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? This is a light day. I think this matches the holiday vibe, holiday weekend vibe, right? This is easy work. This is just making sure that we're clear on the difference between mobile notary and Ron. We know that generally finance buyers cannot sign, they cannot use Ron. We know that Ron is not FaceTime. Right? So I don't want not want to hear any of you guys calling. Well, can't they sign by a FaceTime? Like an agent said one time, I was like, are you serious? Like, no, it's not FaceTime, right? It's a whole platform. All right. All right. As an update, you're welcome. As an update, there will be no office hours tomorrow. We are easing into the holiday break. Tomorrow's a bank holiday. Our office will be closed. There will be no office hours tomorrow. There will also be no office hours all next week and no training next Thursday. Next week, starting tomorrow into next week, will be a holiday break for us. So we will see you guys again on July 13th. I don't know why I was about to say September, but July 13th. To ensure that you don't ever have to figure out who, what, where, when, and why, our trainings, add this calendar to your calendars, right? You can use the QR code and it will update your calendar. When there's no training, you will not see it on your schedule. When there is training, you will see it there on your schedule. Okay? So this is a quick way to ensure that you don't miss training opportunities. Also, when you sign up for trainings, you should also be receiving a text message. I don't know about you, but I love text message reminders because, yeah, I get busy and I forget. All right. All right. Lastly, I mentioned to
Very
you guys at the
helpful.
beginning. Somebody had a question.
No, I just said very helpful. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mentioned at the beginning that the prior trainings are all on our YouTube channel. So this is the QR code to the YouTube channel. If you missed any of them, or even like if you're anything like me, while I work, I listen to classes. So all next week, for if you missed any of those classes, just play them in the background. If you have any questions about the content as you're listening to it, jot it down, shoot us an email, or you can catch us during office hours on Monday, July 13th. All right. All right, I promised this would be easy, and it was, right? Anything else before we jump out of here? You're welcome. This was easy. See, we didn't get a ton of questions. This is easy. This was easy stuff. Listing lab loading,
Yes.
yes.
Can you go over what's the next session is going to be? I got in late this morning, and I heard you were talking about
Yes. Our next big topic is going to be listing lab. We are going to walk through the components of setting up an operating system on the listing side. So we've been touching on it during office hours, all the different components to setting up your listing components, your listing side of your business, right? So that includes, one second, let me move this out of here. That includes, first of all, is your schedule ready? That's one of the things that we identified when we were talking about this during office hours. Um, Many of us lack consistency, and our calendar is not built for consistency. One of the KW isms, if it's not on your calendar, it does not exist. So one of the topics we're going to talk about is how do we build consistency into our schedule, because you have to consistently market or prospect to build a pipeline, and not market. I want to make sure I put an asterisk there. We're going to talk more about this during the next quarter. Marketing is different from prospecting. Marketing is passive. Marketing is Facebook posts, because if I don't get on Facebook, then I'm not going to see your information. But prospecting is getting on the phone. You are being intentional about getting in front of your ideal client. So we're going to talk about that. Again, talking about your schedule. We're going to talk about leverage. As you assuming that you get busy, your prospecting is working, then who's going to be back at the ranch dealing with the contract to close process? I've recommended to you guys numerous times working with a transaction coordinator. For those of you who do not have that in place, that is going to be a conversation. Making sure that you have a transaction coordinator so that your time and focus can be on your highest and best use, which is getting the next listing under contract. One of the other topics we're going to talk about is your lead source. Assuming you do get consistent, and assuming you do dedicate the time to prospecting, do you have enough contacts? Do you have enough people to call? Who are you going to get in front of? Right? So we're going to talk about your lead sources. Who specifically are you targeting? Listings come in very many different shapes and sizes, right? You can have, what if you want to go after FISBOs? What if you want to go after short sales and pre-foreclosures? What if you want to go after probate? What if you want to go after divorce cases? What if you want to go after, what do we call it? They call it empty nesters, or people that are downsizing. What if you want to go after people that are upsizing? All of your lead sources can be downsized or niche down, curated into a niche group. So you have demographic, you have geographic, right? So those are some of the different topics that we're going to hit in the next quarter. We're just really going to be talking more about putting your listing protocol together, because truth be told, most times kind of just winging it, but we really don't have a system, right, for working with listings. So that's next quarter, and that'll be launching listing to sell. Yeah, exactly, Candace. We talk about that all the time. So that'll be launching July 13th. All right. All right.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys.
Bye. Thanks for call.
See you later. What's up, Joanne?
Thanks again. Have a good one. Enjoy your 4.
Thank you. You too.
Great call. Thank you, Rachel. Y'all have a great day.
Bye.